it is. Sometimes people work for a year and a half, or 2 years trying to get something resolved, and we get it fixed in 2 days. And that's what our team loves to do. We love to serve. So count on us to do that. There's 2 sides to my job. One is public policy, and the other one is the needs of my constituents. And it's a privilege to do both. We have enormous challenges in Congress. You know about them. You read about them. We have a $17 trillion debt. Enormous impact on our economy. We have an economic growth right now that's very slow at 1.8%. We still have unemployment ranging somewhere around 8%, truly around 13% if you consider all the people who've given up. We lost 240,000 full-time jobs in June. Employers are afraid to hire right now because of the cost of Obamacare. That's just the reality. I mean, I'm not here to debate the issues. I'm saying those are the hard numbers of what's taking place. These are important challenges. My job is to help create an environment that grows an economy. We have a highly regulated government today. There are some folks up there that believe that they know best what needs to be done. And it's had an enormous impact on the negative side on economic growth. Community banks today are really challenged. They're living under the guidelines of the new Dodd-Frank legislation. They're having to be in the same compliance as big banks. It used to be that 47% of our small business loans took place from community banks. Well, that's not true right now. The number of community banks has decreased from 17,000 to 8,000. They can't afford the compliance costs. They're having to merge. There's capital requirements that they have to be in the same compliant with on the major banks. And it's really hurting our ability to grow and have available capital for growth. The great engine to our economy has always been small businesses. It's been good people like you, good entrepreneurs like you who've gone out there and taken risk and have built their companies and have been a part of other companies and supported other businesses. That's been the strength of America. America, like the rest of the world, was essentially in poverty, but what brought America out through this whole area has been the free market system. And the growth that has come from that engine, we didn't grow because we had a smarter government. We grew because we had smarter people who went out there. And we need to enable and provide for that same economic climate that will help restore the growth that we need for jobs and, in turn, the revenue that comes back to our government. I've had a close relationship with Erskine Bowles for over 20 years. We have great respect for each other. We're 2 different parties, but that doesn't disqualify your one's respect. In fact, I co-chaired a bipartisan effort in Congress called United Solutions with another freshman member, and the objective is to find common ways that we can meet together on different issues. But I was with Erskine at the airport a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, what takes you to Washington? He said, well, I'm going up there to introduce Paul Ryan. Well, Paul Ryan would be the conservative Republican economist that has put out a plan for addressing our debt. And, of course, Erskine has gone around the country with Alan Simpson with a plan as well. Both of them essentially are saying the same thing, that we have to address the $17 trillion debt. Erskine, in fact, I had him speak to a group of our freshmen, and he said, you know, I used to say that this problem was for our grandchildren. Now I say, then I used to say it's for our children. Now I say it's for us, because the impact is so enormous and so egregious upon our economy, because of the cost we pay for that debt. It's about $230 billion every year now with the current interest rates. But as those rates now are going up, we could be paying $1 trillion a year just interest on our debt. That has huge implications. So I'm one who wants to do whatever it takes to address these major concerns, that we can free up our economy, return more to a free market system, that enables good folks like you to be out there to do what you are capable of doing without too much burden from a government. That is my focal point of my belief system. Another issue of concern to me that I've given tremendous focus to under the leadership of a majority leader. He asked me to become chairman of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare. I just returned from Israel this Sunday. Spent 8 days over there in meetings. We spent an hour and a half with Prime Minister Netanyahu, an hour with Shimon Peres. We met with the Israeli ambassador, the American ambassador, the ministers of intelligence, of defense, foreign minister, and the chief negotiator for the Palestinian Authority. The issues in Israel and the Middle East are great, particularly as it relates to Iran. We're on a time bomb with Iran in their capacity to have nuclear warheads and to deliver those warheads. In the view of Israelis and even officials in Washington, that's a matter of months, not years, if they so chose to do that. That is a grave concern all throughout the Middle East. No one in the Middle East, the Saudis or anyone, wants the Iranians to have that capacity. The peace in the Middle East and peace throughout the West will be determined, I believe, by how America stands. You know, I do have a favorite admirer, several throughout the century: Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan. And the perception of each was strength. The wall, the iron wall, came down without firing a shot. Without firing a shot. Because America was perceived as strong. Years ago, I had a foreign policy group called the Charlotte Foreign Policy Forum. And had Reagan and Thatcher and Gorbachev and Shimon Peres and Henry Kissinger and George Crawford Powell and many other people come and speak. On one occasion when I had Mr. Gorbachev, we were riding along in the car and I'm talking to him through this little bald guy who was his interpreter. And I asked him, I said, what was your perception of Ronald Reagan when you met with him in Reykjavik for the first time? He said, I knew whatever Ronald Reagan said he meant. And I said, well, tell me about it. Well, he said, when Ronald Reagan was challenged with air traffic controllers that they were going, to not show up for work, he said, you don't show up for work, I'm going to fire you. And you fired him. And he said, I knew that man meant what he said. America built up its capacities, enormous defense capacities. We were perceived as strong. And as a result of that kind of leadership, and Ms. Thatcher, the Pope, and others, that wall came down. Hundreds of millions of people were freed from the bondage of communism. We need to be strong in the world. We shouldn't apologize for our strength. That doesn't mean that we send our soldiers overseas. As I said, Ronald Reagan never fired a shot. But there's a change in the world for the good. And part of our dilemma today is, what are we really going to do about Iran? When we were with the Prime Minister, I sat right across from him. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, what are you going to do if America doesn't stand strong? And he just come out of surgery, so he was still weak. He sat on his chair and frankly he pounded his fist on the table. He said, we have got to address this issue. We cannot walk away. We will go from a toothless paper tiger to a real tiger who will go out and assert its evil throughout the world. So those are challenges. What is taking place in Syria is a major challenge. That's their own civil war, but whoever ends up with those stockpiles of chemical and biological weapons affects you and me. They can have their own civil war. but those chemical biological weapons are transported. Those are the kind of things that I don't want to get out there and be too much of an alarmist, but we need to realize what are the threats. The thing that really impressed me about the Israelis is they've lived under this threat for 65 years, and they have been resilient. Economically, there's more capital investment, venture capital investment, per capita in Israel than any country in the world. Think of that. There are more startup companies in Israel than any country but the United States. And yet, since 2005, 8,000 rockets have been launched into Israel. Then they have a superb defense called the Iron Dome right now that takes out most of these rockets, and they're building what's called David's Sling, which will take out nuclear warheads. Our country is involved in supporting that. So I was impressed with their commitment to peace. They have stated publicly that they will recognize the PLO. In the peace negotiations, when I asked the chief negotiator for the Palestinians why he demanded that convicted criminals, thieves, murderers should be released from prison as a precondition to negotiations, all he could say was, well, they've already been in prison 25 years. But the PLO must recognize the Jewish state as well. When that happens, the rest of the piece of the puzzle will fall into place. But there are, to this day, they haven't been willing to do that. So these are huge, kind of big picture issues, but they affect where we live today. And I want to make sure that the job that I'm doing for you maintains security, maintains the way of life, that we can continue to live in freedom and liberty. So thank you for that privilege of serving you, and I will be glad now to take any questions that you might have.